Mass disappearances, promiscuous priests? Critics can't stop gobbling gabagool. So are they Breaking Bad, or are these really the best television drama seasons? Although The Americans finished strong, the show's creative peak came during its fourth season, as it was around this point in the show that many of the central plot points came to fruition. Specifically, Philip's relationship with Martha, a government employee he's been quietly siphoning information out of for years, finally comes undone when he's forced to frame Jean, one of Martha's co-workers, for her spying. Martha's exfiltration causes a rift between Philip and Elizabeth and ultimately leads both of them to question their loyalty to a country they haven't set foot in for years. At the same time, their daughter Paige is now fully aware that her parents are Russian spies. By the end of the season, she's considering entering the spy game herself. The season's final moments emphasize the price that Philip and Elizabeth have had to pay as a result of their profession. The Americans was always a grim show, but Season 4 spends a huge portion of its runtime examining what being a spy does to a person's soul. Philip and Elizabeth are hollow shells of people, and by the end of the season, they realize that's not the fate they want for their daughter.
Don't do this, Paige.
Dad!
You have no idea. No idea.
The docudrama series The Staircase began in 2004 as an early contribution to the now wildly popular true crime genre. It follows the trial of Michael Peterson, who was convicted of murdering his wife, Kathleen. After a successful first season, the showrunner published more installments based on updates in the case in 2013 and 2018. The miniseries, directed by Jean-Xavier Lestrade, chronicles not only the twists and turns of the original case, but also how corruptible the justice system is and the horrible toll that prison can take on a person. While precious few miniseries provide viewers the satisfaction of definitive proof regarding the truth behind a crime, The Staircase relishes in the ambiguous set of facts that surround the case. Whether or not Michael Peterson was guilty of the crime he was convicted for, his family and the audience must live with the uncertainty about whether he deserved the punishment he ultimately received for the crime he was convicted. It's always disappointing to see shows as great as Enlightened get cancelled, especially after the show repeatedly achieved new heights throughout its second and final season. The series tells the story of Amy Jellicoe, a career-oriented woman who has a breakdown and ends up at Open Air, a rehabilitation program in Hawaii. When she returns from the program, a sunnier, peppier version of herself, she discovers that reacclimating to her old life might not be as straightforward as she expected. In Season 2, Enlightened transforms Amy into an impassioned crusader whose only goal is to take down the company she once worked for. She spends the season working with a journalist known for uncovering corruption, but ultimately discovers that the systems she's trying to destroy are much harder to take down than she thought. Like so many people in modern America, Amy wants to be an advocate for change, but she's caught between her fierce idealism and the intractable nature of modern capitalism. Huge multinational companies just don't play by the same rules as the rest of us. It was easy to be dismissive of Noah Hawley's decision to adapt Fargo, the 1996 Coen Brothers masterpiece, into a TV series of the same name. Even after the first season, it wasn't entirely clear how Hawley was going to transform this story into something that could last for years. After Season 2, though, Fargo proved that fans of the original film could stop worrying so much about the adaptation. The show's second season dives back into the late 1970s, a time when many Americans felt like their country was in decline, to tell a story of warring crime families and intergenerational conflict. The narrative is beautifully paced through the season's 10 episodes, and all of the actors know how to make a meal out of the peculiar dialect that the show relies on.
Okay then.
By telling a story about people who lash out and hurt one another for no reason, Fargo Season 2 explores the limits of what we can know about human nature. While both a serious drama and a compelling comedy, Fleabag Season 2 is also a love story. The first season followed Phoebe Waller-Bridge's titular character as she excavated the traumas of her past and her own role in creating them. In Season 2, Fleabag attempts to move forward and ultimately finds herself attracted to a Catholic priest. The two consummate their relationship before the priest decides that his dedication must remain with his faith. Fleabag is funnier and sharper in its second season, but it's every bit as devastating as it was in its initial run. As these episodes make clear, the fourth wall breaking that has been a core part of the show's style is also a coping mechanism for the show's main character. Fleabag talks to the camera and the audience to distance herself from the world immediately in front of her.
Cheers. May these be the worst of our days.
Hey. Don't know who this guy is.
In the season's final moments, though, she leaves the camera behind, ready to lead a life in which she's fully engaged with the people around her. She may have lost out on the handsome priest, but her ill-starred love for him gave her maturity and humility. Laura Palmer is dead. That's the simple premise of Twin Peaks, one that horrifies creators David Lynch and Mark Frost as much as it enthralls them. Across its first season, Twin Peaks aired 8 nearly perfect episodes that were focused on finding Laura's killer and discovering the town of Twin Peaks' seedy underbelly. Across those 8 hours, Twin Peaks combined elements of a murder investigation with small-town drama, science fiction, and even a few helpful handfuls of soap opera storytelling. As with much of Lynch's work, the tone is nightmarishly surreal and incredibly stylish, complicating what at first glance might seem like a standard police procedural. Twin Peaks feels like a normal town, but it's hiding a darkness as deep and terrifying as the pits of hell. Although the show stumbled in its later seasons, the first season alone made Twin Peaks one of the most important and impactful TV series of all time. Decades after its 1990 air date, it still feels like audiences aren't fully ready for what the show has to offer. Homeland rode the wave of rave reviews for its first season into its second. Although the critical reception to the show eventually became less rapturous, Season 2 proved to be a high watermark. The show follows Carrie, a CIA agent with bipolar disorder who becomes convinced that a returning war veteran named Brody has been turned by Al-Qaeda. After Brody fails to detonate a bomb meant to assassinate the vice president at the end of Season 1, Season 2 deals with the fallout from his inaction. Carrie and Brody eventually strike up a relationship, which only complicates Carrie's place inside the CIA. The espionage on Homeland is a huge part of the show's appeal, but the relationships between its characters are what makes the show feel truly lived in. Homeland was a phenomenon upon its initial release, and the reviews for Season 2 proved that it was a series with some staying power. Season 2 of The Sopranos was able to build off the excitement that many critics had after the show's incredible first season. Although some have come to see the second season as a bit of a letdown, it's also received plenty of praise. In the second season, Tony discovers that one of his closest friends is an FBI informant, and he continues to see Dr. Melfi in spite of her increasing disgust over what he does for a living. Meanwhile, Tony's sister returns to his life, and she and Tony must confront their complicated relationship with each other and with their mother. The second season of The Sopranos is every bit as strong as the first, even if it lacks some of the shock factor that made those initial episodes so celebrated. With its second installment, The Sopranos solidified its status as superb television and proved it was in for the long haul. By the time The Sopranos was in its third season, it had cemented itself as one of the best TV shows on air, and possibly of all time. In Season 3, the show dives even deeper into Tony's psyche and the reason for his continued panic attacks, and we get deeper insights into Tony's relationships with his children. This season also gave fans one of the best and hardest to watch episodes of the entire series, in which Dr. Melfi is understandably tempted to make use of her client's extrajudicial power. The genius of The Sopranos was the way the show managed to put equal emphasis on every aspect of its characters' lives. The mob storylines were as compelling as ever, and they were only made more interesting by the insight the show provided into Tony's life outside of work. Throughout the show, there's little separation between Tony's family and his criminal activity, and as his children grow up and attempt to chart their own courses, that only becomes more evident.
Is Mom there?
Yeah, she's here. How's school?
Fine. Is Mom there?
Given the fact that it's widely regarded as one of the great TV dramas of all time, it should come as little surprise that several seasons of The Sopranos made it onto this list. While it's common for popular shows to taper out near the end, The Sopranos stayed strong right up to its finale. The controversy over the finale tends to overshadow the fact that Season 6 was consistently great long before that abrupt cut to black. The 6th season was split into 2 parts, with 12 episodes airing in one block, followed by an additional 9-episode run to conclude the entire series. Many of the members of Tony's criminal organization seem to be on a path towards redemption, but they're all ultimately pulled back into the violent life of crime they've been leading all along. They may believe that they're capable of change, but as the final season shows, becoming a new person is much harder than it seems.
We're soldiers, Soldiers don't go to hell.
By the time Season 3 rolled around, The Leftovers was the definition of a critical darling. After a divisive first season and a critically adored second, expectations were high for the 3rd installment. Luckily for showrunners and fans alike, the series' 3rd season delivered. Set 7 years after the departure that launched the series, Season 3 focuses on the show's core characters as they reckon with whether or not they've actually evolved in the years since 2% of the world's population vanished. The show is just as strange as ever in Season 3, which shifts much of the action to Australia as some characters begin to suspect that the end of the world is imminent. In just 8 short episodes, the show manages to tie off many of its central relationships and also provides glimmers of hope for characters who have spent much of the series totally lost.
The world is ending.
In a brutal, perfect finale, we see the character of Nora living alone in the distant future after attempting to reunite with the family she lost on departure day. The episode is beautiful, haunting, and lovely, and it's a great showcase for leading actors Justin Theroux and Carrie Coon, who give 2 exceptional performances as the show's broken, desperate leads. After an incredible first season, The Wire returned for a second season that dazzled critics. With the focus on the effects broken and corrupt systems have on the lives of its characters, Season 2 depicted the ways in which the dock workers were ultimately connected to the drug trade and to an international crime syndicate that flourished as a result. It also achieved the rare distinction of making a compelling drama out of the seemingly dry subject matter of union politics like seniority rights and decertification. The second season of The Wire also takes a hard look at the decline of the working class, showing how the changing world has destabilized labor. As the world moves forward, many essential workers get left behind. The Wire was about one city's problems, but they often felt so universal that anyone could empathize with them. Considered by critics to be the pinnacle of the show's quality, Season 3 of The Wire has a lot to offer. The season's central premise is the creation of safe zones throughout the city of Baltimore where drug activity is legal, a situation hilariously dubbed Hamsterdam. It's a dangerous, high-stakes approach to crime management that seems irresponsible but ultimately leads to lower levels of violence in the district where the rules are put in place. Ultimately, though, those safe zones are exposed and politicians use their existence to make grandstanding speeches. Meanwhile, the drug war continues unabated across the rest of the city, and violence escalates to the point where Stringer Bell is killed by Omar Little and Brother Mouzone. The season is a masterpiece of carefully plotted story, one that imagines a brighter future for Baltimore that always seems to be just out of reach. While The Wire never shied away from the systemic nature of the problems it depicted, Season 3 also showed how decisions made by the people in those systems can both reinforce and untangle those problems.
You going back to your home tonight. We gonna be in our patrol cars, and the boys still gonna be out there in them corners.
The 4th season of The Wire may be the most heartbreaking of all. Each season of the show focused on a different institution within urban Baltimore. Season 4 turned the camera on Baltimore's youth and the underfunded school system that tries desperately to keep them from turning to crime. It's tough to watch how the system slowly corrupts innocent children, but it gives audiences a full picture of exactly how broken the world of The Wire is, while shedding light on how closely the show mirrors reality. The season's other major storyline, which involves the primary race for Baltimore mayor, establishes how the political machine stifles any attempt at reform. Thomas Carcady ascends to the office of mayor, intending to change the systems that have trapped so many people in difficult circumstances, but finds himself unable to deliver. The frank look at municipal dysfunction gets leavened by moments of gallows humor. When Breaking Bad starts, Walter White is an average guy. Maybe he's got some anger issues, and maybe he feels stifled by his job as a high school chemistry teacher, but he's a dedicated family man. That changes when he gets a cancer diagnosis, setting off a chain of events that leads him to start making and selling meth. By season 4, Walt is still alive, but he's become an irredeemable monster. Season 4 is so well regarded in part because it's the season where Walt fully embraces this transformation as he attempts to take down Gus Fring, the show's main villain. Walt wins his battle with Gus, but it comes at the soul-corrupting cost of poisoning a child and planting bombs on an old man's wheelchair. These measures make it clear that by the end of season 4, Walt is willing to do anything to achieve power. Aside from featuring a myriad of iconic scenes, season 4 plumbed the depths of each of its characters, producing both tense drama and a particularly dark shade of black comedy. Breaking Bad went out on top. In its 5th and final season, Walt is finally making all the calls. He's the head of his own meth empire, and he's working with Mike and Jesse to become one of the major forces in the Southwest drug trade. Much like The Sopranos, the first half of this split season depicts a near-meteoric rise for Walt in the aftermath of Gus Fring's death. Ultimately, though, the rise can't last. Walt's brother-in-law Hank discovers that Walt is the elusive meth dealer he's been tracking for years. Hank's unraveling of Walt's secret ultimately leads to Walt's downfall as his family loses everything and he's forced to go on the run. Jesse winds up imprisoned by a group of neo-Nazis where he's forced to cook meth or be cruelly tortured. In the end, Walt finds some measure of redemption and humanity by sacrificing himself to save Jesse. He also finally admits to his wife, Skylar, that all the horrible things he's done was for himself and not a selfless mission to provide for his family. Season 5 is a bleak masterpiece, serving as a reminder that all the terrible things audiences have watched Walt do over the course of the show will eventually come back to haunt him and those he cares about. Rectify is a story about broken people working to make themselves whole. The show follows a man who spent nearly 20 years on death row for a crime he didn't commit. DNA evidence ultimately exonerates him, and he's released from prison. When he returns to his hometown, he finds it a strange place totally unlike the one he left, and he's forced to reckon with all of the relationships he left behind when he was incarcerated. Through every season, and especially in its 4th and final outing, Rectify was a quiet, deeply moving character drama. It never overplayed its hand, and it allowed its characters to grow and change as the episodes progressed. Rectify may not be remembered as one of the best TV shows of all time, but that's because it has none of the flair or excitement that defined many of the series on this list. Instead, it was happy to be subtly contemplative and beautiful in ways that most TV shows rarely try to be. Genndy Tartakovsky's Primal is clearly a long-simmering, delicately executed passion project for its creator, an animation titan who looms so large over his world that his name is in the title. The series is one of the most ambitious, visually deep, and gorgeous TV cartoons in decades. An epic fantasy quest, Primal feels more reminiscent of a mystical saga from a novel rather than an Adult Swim show from the person who conceived Dexter's Laboratory and Hotel Transylvania.
So what do you want, a cookie? You did all right, man. Move on already.
Deliberately historically inaccurate to maximize drama and possibility, Primal takes place in a distant prehistoric time period. Here, humans, earlier evolutions of humankind, and dinosaurs all live among each other, fighting to survive and thrive. The action centers on Spear, a Neanderthal and caveman left alone in a brutal world when a pack of dinosaurs kills his family. He befriends a small dino named Fang, whose family was killed by the same vicious clan. They form a de facto unit and a strong bond, which fuels the action in the almost critically perfect Season 2 of Primal. Spear and Fang face all sorts of internal and external conflicts, from a giant shark to more advanced groups of humans, and the animation team behind it all was up to the task. Tartakovsky told IndieWire, "There are a number of episodes where there are 8 to 10-minute fight sequences, and each one of those almost broke the studio." Atlanta is a thoughtful, meditative, surreal look at modern life, particularly for young black men balancing artistic pursuits with the need to make enough money to pull themselves out of poverty in a hostile world. It's a dazzling series that changes its tone as the story requires, with each season and episode wildly different from the last, Created, chiefly written by, and starring comedian actor musician Donald Glover, Atlanta routinely churns out 30-minute masterpieces. According to Metacritic, the best of these fall within season 2 of the show. This season is subtitled Robin Season to reflect a certain desperation felt by the extended universe of characters in this barely fictional representation of the titular southern metropolis. The final part of the final season of the final chapter of the Breaking Bad saga certainly stuck the landing. Bob Odenkirk joined the cast of Breaking Bad midway through its run as Saul Goodman, a sleazy bus bench lawyer who helps with the legal issues of the show's various drug manufacturing and distributing characters. He was so compelling, AMC commissioned the spin-off Better Call Saul, the Breaking Bad prequel that showed how small-time hustler and part-time public defender Jimmy McGill evolved into a swaggering wheeler-dealer of questionable morality. By season 6.5 of Better Call Saul, the transformation from Jimmy to Saul nears its completion, while the rest of the Breaking Bad backstory also gets filled in. Character-driven and empathetic, the final slew of Better Call Saul episodes also give quite a few glimpses into what became of Jimmy after he had to abandon his life and identity as Saul Goodman.
Look at that!
It seems Saul mostly lives his life alone, depressed, and working at a Cinnabon. But the last few episodes show us it doesn't stay that way forever. Saul starts up his old scams again, and all of a sudden, his old life begins to catch up with him. Based on acclaimed Italian novelist Elena Ferrante's book of the same name, My Brilliant Friend was produced for Italian television, but airs in the US on HBO. Ferrante has co-written every episode of the critically lauded series, which tells a story of a triumph and tragedy-filled friendship between two girls from a poor neighborhood near Naples who met as children in the 1950s. At the outset of season 3, it's the dawn of the 1970s, and Leela and Elena have taken very different paths into their young adulthoods. Leela is struggling. Having married at 17, birthed a child, and left her husband, she finds herself working in a meat processing factory to support herself. Meanwhile, Elena has left Naples, become a famous author, and lives comfortably among the wealthy literary elite. As each season tells a different part of the long saga and is set in a different era, the filmic nature of My Brilliant Friend changes. Season 3 embraces the aesthetic of its 1970s settings, emulating the look and feels of American indie movies of the era. Murder One is not as well known as many of the series on this list, but that doesn't mean the show wasn't influential. Lasting for only 2 seasons, Murder One was created by Steven Bochco and broke the mold when it debuted in 1995, focusing the entirety of its first season on a single criminal case. In heavily serializing its story, Murder One helped to more firmly establish the idea that viewers would be interested in the minutiae of the case as it winds its way towards a trial. Paired with award-winning cinematography by filmmaker Aaron Schneider, Murder One's formula-breaking plot managed to make every detail of the criminal case more fascinating than the last. As a documentary, Planet Earth 2 might not seem like it belongs on this list of dramas, but let's trust Metacritic on this one. There's only 1 season of Planet Earth 2, but this sequel to the original, Planet Earth, proves that nature documentaries don't have to be dry museum material. Narrated by David Attenborough, Planet Earth 2 is an ode to the wildlife that exists all over the planet. The footage is breathtaking and remarkably vivid, and it serves as a reminder that the world contains beauty that doesn't require any sort of computer-generated enhancement. The 2016 miniseries, which was released 10 years after its predecessor, also serves as an urgent reminder of all that the world stands to lose if nothing is done to combat the threat of industrialization and climate change. The documentary isn't explicitly political, but merely by documenting the natural beauty of the ecosystems and wildlife around us, the film highlights their imperiled state.